Hello you, welcome to the Radio Academy podcast, the pod that gives you something new to listen to every week and gives you a bit of an insight into a cool recent audio thing that's been put out into the world. And if you've been with us since we started this podcast back in February, you'll know I'm not its proper presenter. That honour goes to Roisin Hastie, best known for doing the news on Radio 1. She's also on the BBC World Service. She's lovely. She's a good mate of mine and she's given me the keys to the pod while she goes off to have a baby. And I'm delighted to say that Roisin has given birth to a beautiful baby girl called Isla. She is adorable. So huge congratulations to Roisin and her husband Jimmy, also of the audio world, and their black lab Bailey, who now has a sister. Enjoy the lack of sleep and nappy changes, guys, and Roisin will be back here next year. Until then, you've got to put up with me. Sorry. And this week, we are talking about this.
We're taking a slightly different tack for this edition of The Daily. What on earth is going on right now? I mean, the markets remain in turmoil. The Conservative Party is turning on itself like a dog with a particularly tasty tail. And in the centre of it all, the eye of the storm, or maybe the belly of the beast, the Prime Minister. Does anyone trust Liz Truss? The markets, the Conservative Party, the public? I'm in our Westminster office to find out with our economics editor and deputy political editor.
I'm Ed Conway.
I'm Sam Coates.
And I'm Niall Paterson, and this is the Sky News Daily.
Yes, the Sky News Daily, and Niall Paterson is its host. He's been one of the main faces of Sky News on the telly for nearly 2 decades and has recently taken over the pod. Paul Stanworth is in charge of podcasts at Sky News, and we are going to talk not just about how to do a daily podcast in what's a very competitive market, but also Sky's big boost in its audio offer over the course of this year.
I've been here since January, and it had an audio operation or a podcast operation before that, but it was clear when I arrived here and did my interview to get the job here that Sky News wanted to put audio much more at the heart of what it's doing. Of course, you know, it is a very important way that audiences now consume news, and Sky wanted to be a much stronger part of that. And I think we've seen in the last year that the bosses here, they're really investing in the team. They're always looking at new ways of improving the offer, but also improving the audio offer. And what we've done in the last year is we've bolstered the daily podcast with Niall, who lots of people will know from the telly. And Niall is now the new full-time presenter of our daily podcasts, who has made that switch. He's still on the telly, as he was last week, but his day job, if you like, is doing the daily podcast. Currently, year on year, I think we'll be on for about 43% growth this year. I get bogged down / obsessed with the numbers, and I think we can still make that 50%, but we're on for a substantial growth this year through our daily and our weekly and our long form podcasts. What's been really great here is just how central everyone wants to put audio to the operation. So if you take Niall's podcast, it's a deeper look at the big stories every day, as you might imagine, but there are people all around this newsroom, and Niall will agree, that really, get that this is a place where our expertise and our experts can come and show off their knowledge to the audience. And there is a huge amount of expertise to tap into here, whether it's economics with our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, whether it's politics with Sam Coates or Beth Rigby, whether it's eyewitness reporting from Ukraine or Afghanistan with Alex Crawford and Stuart Ramsey. There are daily podcasts out there that just do not have that expertise and journalism to tap into, and we've got that, and that's what we want to showcase on the daily audio, but also in our long form products as well.
And Sky, as you say, Paul, does have quite a few podcasts out there. We're focusing today mostly on the daily, which Niall, you present. Niall, I guess it's a kind of does what it says on the tin situation, but just give us a little bit of an insight into what the Sky News Daily is, if anyone's listening who hasn't heard it.
Yeah, well, we're aiming for 20 to 25 minutes. It's something you can listen to on the daily commute. Usually you'll have them there ready in the morning for you before you leave the house, and it just gives an opportunity to go a bit deeper into a story. I mean, my path to being the podcast host is an interesting one, given that I was a reporter, then on-screen presenter. Look, I understand that these specialist correspondents of mine do not like being limited to 2.5 minutes of a two-way. So actually bringing them into the studio, sitting them down, having a discussion very much like you and I are having right now, is so much up their street. And because you have that additional time, because most of them know me pretty well from asking them questions on the TV, there is an instant relationship, almost a rapport, and just putting things in a slightly more conversational, slightly slowed down format, bringing in key players from within our organisation, but obviously guests from outside as well. It just gives us an opportunity to tell the story in a bit more depth. I've always said this. I think anyone who's watched any of my kind of political coverage back when I was reporting and all the way to last week on the telly, I like to have a bit of humour in there as well, just to leaven some of the bad news. I don't know if you've noticed, Christian, but it's not exactly been a wonderful time for the past 4 years potentially. So
Neil, I work in news. Trust me, I've noticed. Good Lord, I've noticed.
We just then approaching things with just a slightly arched eyebrow, and it's from my perspective, it's almost like being back reporting again. This is not a presenting gig as I would understand it. I'm handed a set of scripts and I smile coquettishly into the camera. This is me writing the intros, getting the questions blocked, providing a payoff, and hopefully slipping a couple of jokes in there as well.
Yeah, well, I applaud that. And how have you found the transition, Neil, from telly? And let's be honest, with Sky News, you've pretty much done everything there is to do over a fantastic career at Sky News. How have you found that transition into the daily podcast?
Christian, I'll be absolutely honest with you. There has been a learning curve, but that to me has been one of the nicest things about this. Like, I have come into this. I did a bit of radio many moons ago at the very, very start of my career. So I have always been very much focused on pictures plus words. So popping myself into kind of the role of the daily host has really forced me to start rethinking the way I go about telling a story, the importance of a narrative flow through a script, the importance of blocking your questions in the right order, the importance of telling people who haven't got pictures in front of them what is going on, and eliciting that kind of detail from the correspondents, say Alex Crawford out in Ukraine, Stuart Ramsey out in Brazil, getting those details out of them to tell the story properly. This podcast malarkey, it's not easy.
Well, no, I think a lot of people listening to this will share that viewpoint. And one thing that isn't too easy about it, particularly in the daily news market at the moment, is, let's be honest, it's competitive. You've got Times Radio doing daily podcasts. We've also got the, of course, heavily publicised news agents. Paul, what do you try and do differently with the daily to all these others that are out there, and even the new ones that have popped up in the last 2 years?
Yeah, I think what's really important is the thing I've already said. We have something to tap into here, and that is the ethos of Sky News. It's the expertise, it's the impartial reporting, it's the eyewitness reporting, it's the original stories. We have got that on tap here, and not every daily podcast has that, and it is that space when Stuart Ramsey, in the early, some of our most popular daily podcasts, Christian, in the last 12 months have been around Ukraine. Of course, they've been around Ukraine. But what they offered was Stuart Ramsey on the night of the invasion, talking for half an hour the day after about what happened. John Sparks is one of our correspondents who spends a lot of time in Ukraine. And he, one of the early podcasts there was a 21-hour train journey that him and his crew had to take from Kharkiv, I think it was, up to the Polish border. And, the TV that on the Sky News at 10 that night was a phenomenal piece of eyewitness reporting. But what we gave John, and actually his crew in that case, was the space to tell that story in a lot more detail. And that is one of our most downloaded podcasts of the year. So you've got all that eyewitness stuff, you've got all that expertise. I keep talking about the likes of Ed, and original stories as well. The Daily, in the last couple of weeks, we did one on an original Sky investigation into failings or allegations of failings by a mental health care provider for young people, which came from one of our correspondents, Lisa Holland. And it was, again, you had a 4-minute piece on the telly, you could read about it, but what the Daily gave her was an opportunity to... It was an 8-month investigation. It had been done with one of the newspapers, The Independent, I think, and it gave Lisa a chance that she won't get anywhere else at Sky News to sit down and go through what was a really complicated but very human story.
And it is brilliant. I obviously am biased because any of the podcasts we get on here I enjoy, but you guys do such a good job. And one of the things I really like about it is, you know, I remember listening to the one of the days where the Liz Truss premiership was coming crashing down, and obviously there is only one story you're going to do and only one thing people want analysis on, and that was the Liz Truss story. But there are other days when the story surprised you, as you say, some of Sky News' originals. There was one that comes to mind about a girl who was featured in a wartime photograph, and you dug into her particular story. Neil, how do you find that balance between doing the on-the-day daily news, because as you say, we are in an era of life where there's never going to be a shortage of that, and also digging into those stories that I say are a little bit different? How do you find that balance?
It's really interesting to me that that's one of the ones that leapt out to you. For people who don't know it, I'm sure they'll know the photo. It was Napalm Girl, this 7-year-old, I think she was 7 at the time, maybe 9 years old, Kim Fuck, who was, you know, a photo taken in the immediate aftermath of one of the napalm attacks that took place during the Vietnam War. I'm looking at an old, grainy, black and white photograph. 5 young children are in the front of frame on a pockmarked highway, moving with a group of soldiers. Your eyes go first to the boy closest to the camera, simply dressed in shorts and shirt. He appears to be crying, his eyes closed and mouth open. Behind him, another boy, surely no more than 3, looks fearfully over his shoulder at an out-of-focus grey mass where the horizon should be. Another pair of children, hand in hand on the right, a boy and maybe his older sister, that you realise are running towards the photographer. And in almost the exact centre of the shot, a 9-year-old girl, arms outstretched as if seeking a hug. She is completely naked. It is not her nakedness that is shocking, however. It's her face. She looks straight at you, down the barrel of the lens, screaming in pain and in terror. I'd say that that's the thing that we have over some of our rivals, is that, yeah, look, do you know what? We have a news organisation that is ready to go from 0 to 100 from a standing start if it's a big story, particularly a big foreign or political story. But we've also got the scope, given the format, given the team that I'm working with. You know, these are not political specialists necessarily. Everyone's got a good general knowledge. They're generalists. So when something a little bit off-piste comes up, we can give it the same treatment that we do to the stuff that you know you're going to be getting on the morning that, you know, Liz Truss leaves Number 10 and Rishi Sunak wanders in. From my point of view, as a journalist, as a presenter, as a reporter, you know, that kind of variety just keeps you interested in doing it. And I think sometimes, particularly on some of the more well-established podcasts outside of Sky, you get the feeling that sometimes they're just going through the motions, that it's podcasting by numbers. I mean, here, genuinely, I'm working with a young but really talented team who've got the same level of enthusiasm for the story, no matter what the story is, that I had, you know, on my first day reporting outside Number 10 doing politics. And when you've got that enthusiasm, you know, we used to talk about, when I was doing television most of the time, you know, we used to talk about punching through the screen. You know, it's the audio equivalent. When you've got an enthusiastic and committed and talented team behind you, you're going to end up with something that does punch through the speakers a bit more.
How much are you enjoying it, Neil? Because Paul mentioned earlier, but only last week to when we're recording this, you were presenting breakfast while Kay Burley was off. This must be such a different job, making a daily podcast. How much do you enjoy that difference?
Well, I certainly enjoy not having the alarm go off at 5:30.
Oh, I don't blame you.
That for me is one. I'm not even joking. It's one of the key aspects of loving my life on podcast. Do you know, they are two such different beasts And to be honest with you, as a statement of intent by Sky, the guy who fills in for Kay Burley, who did I interview the other week? I had the Foreign Secretary, I didn't have the Home Secretary. I was looking forward to that one. But, we have pretty much every senior person in Cabinet, bar the PM, bar the Home Secretary. And then, after I've done that, I come straight back to doing the podcast. I love it. I genuinely love it. It's always nice to be challenged. And, if you've been doing kind of, reporting on telly for as long as I have, then there will be bits of it that you could do standing on your head. Not the big ministerial interview at 7:05 in the morning, but a lot of the rest of it you can do pretty straightforwardly without thinking about it too much. On this, I have to be on my game. I have to be on my game every time. And that I really enjoy. So, do you know what? It's a bit like comparing apples and chairs. They are such different things, right? Genuinely, that I couldn't pick a favourite. I loved still having the ability to dip my toe back into the telly, but I've been missing being on podcasts for the 2 weeks that I was away. And as soon as we're finished talking to you, I've got 2 interviews lined up, and I've got one to get knockout for tomorrow. So, genuinely, I'm having a lot of fun, and hopefully a little bit of that comes through as well.
Yeah. Well, it's lovely that somebody who, as you say, Neil, with a bit more of a telly background has come into this audio world that, we love so much and is loving it. I think that's a lovely story to hear. Paul, I just wonder from your perspective, I think a lot of people listening to this will know Neil's background with Sky News, but obviously you, Paul, have been doing things from Good Morning Britain to 5 Live to Radio 1 Newsbeat. It's a lot of the more traditional broadcast media news. How different has it been for you in this sort of, it's not like podcasts are a brand new thing. It's not the new world, but it feels like maybe a bit of a change to go back to when you were at 5 Live, say 8-9 years ago. We're in a pretty different place now with news media, aren't we? How different has it been for you?
Thank God I kept that LinkedIn up to date. Yeah, but it's different, but it's the same because I've worked in lots of newsrooms in lots of places. But what is, I guess, different here is I'm championing a new way of doing things and a new way of reaching audiences and a new way of storytelling. And people are interested, and people call by the desk and offer an idea or ask what we're doing on that day's daily. We had a series with Stuart Ramsey, who I've mentioned before, our chief correspondent, about Afghans who'd fled Afghanistan and come to the UK, which we put out for the first anniversary of the return of the Taliban. So it's great that people are really interested, and people like Beth Rigby, who does a supplementary Beth Rigby, a political editor, supplementary podcast to go with her TV show that just, again, allows her space to be conversational and talk through, what she's been doing with her producer once a week. And you don't get that Beth on the telly. And so there's been great success there. And it works the other way. There's more investment coming for podcasts as well, which is really great for everyone on the team, me in particular. There's going to be a new studio space coming that will be visualised. We've got some award nominations in the next couple of weeks, from Audio Production Awards to Media Freedom Award. There was a bit of audio here already in terms of Sky News Radio, which has the IRN contract and provides news and sport for millions of commercial radio listeners. So there was something here already, and we're building on that, and that hopefully people are starting to see the success.
And just finally, very briefly to both of you, if you could do 3 bullet points, what's the key to a good daily news podcast have you guys found?
Me presenting it.
It's a great answer, Neil. It's a great answer.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
I can see Paul rolling his eyes. I've seen it before.
I've written down insightful, conversational, and I think the other one is, where appropriate, don't be too serious. I'm going to mention Neil wasn't here, as we said last week, but when Matt Hancock was announced as a contestant for I'm a Celebrity, we, like of course we do, whenever it's appropriate, we ditch our plans and we changed, and we felt like it was the story everyone was talking about, and it wasn't just silly. He's had the whips suspended. He was this man so important during COVID, and we changed to that. And if you listen to our chief political correspondent John Craig on that episode, he is just brilliant at telling this story, of course keeping to kind of all the values of reporting, but also just having a bit of fun with it, and he wouldn't have had that place to do it on the telly.
a cynic might say rather cruelly and churlishly, he perhaps has some hefty divorce bills to pay. Who can say what his motives are? He talks about reaching a wide audience. Well, that may be true, but most of the politicians who've gone on that programme have faced ridicule and embarrassment.
Yeah, I was gutted I missed that one. I genuinely was gutted.
Well, when you booked a fortnight off, I did wonder where you were going. But yeah, you know, I think if you listen to that, you know, of course we're not going to do every story like that, of course not, but it just shows the range and flexibility you've got with this sort of thing.
I can tell you, Paul Stanworth has had some challenges in his career. No, I'm not talking about heading up Sky News' audio team. At one point, he had to manage me. I'm grateful to Niall and Paul for their time. I think it's really interesting to hear just what Sky think they can do that their rivals can't, and also the importance of giving journalists and correspondents the time to do what they do best: tell stories. Check out Sky News Daily wherever you get your podcasts. It's available, well, daily, I suppose. Next week, we're joined by Nick Grimshaw, who talks about life after Radio 1, his new book, and his food podcast too. There are new episodes from us every week, a load of past episodes in our archive, so scroll back and have a look at those, and find out all the perks of being a Radio Academy member by searching Radio Academy membership. It costs just £3 a month. Very reasonable. I will talk to you next week. I look forward to that. Bye for now.